Welcome to the Bros of Gardening, where we're going to talk today about sensory gardening. But of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't introduce my co-host, Daniel Van Dyke. And of course, our producer in the background that you won't see, but you'll hear from. He'll kind of help guide us through this topic of sensory gardening. That's Alex. And we've got a special guest today. We've got Heather Wheatley from Proven Winners. So we're super excited to have you here. We're very excited to get into this topic. I think it's going to be a great one. And before we get started, I just wanted to kind of give you a chance to kind of tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, well, first of all, I'm delighted to be here. What a privilege in this pioneering effort of these podcasts, which I am a huge fan. But I'm also a huge fan of Proven Winners. So I have culminated my career to start working with Proven Winners. Only been 2 years. Yep. But in my career, I've been Proven Winners the whole time, in trialing plant material and is this as good as Proven Winners? So I knew I would end up here. They didn't, but I did.
Gotta love it when a plan comes together.
Yes.
Well, welcome to our podcast. I mean, we were very, very excited to have our first guest. You're our first official guest on the podcast. So it's going to be an exciting topic. So to kind of guide us, we'll let Alex kind of give us our first question to get us going here.
All right. So for those who are unaware, what is sensory gardening?
All right. Well, who wants to tackle that one?
So I'll take a stab at it. So again, I think as we've talked about in the past, we all come from different areas of the kind of horticulture industry. And so I look at things a little bit more from a landscape perspective. And so for sensory gardening, what we define it as is anything that's going to highlight any of the five senses.
Yep.
And so that's its most basic definition. And a lot of times I feel like people don't even necessarily know they want a sensory garden, but then they start asking for certain aspects of it. And it's like, no, I mean, really what you're looking for is certain elements of a sensory garden. Obviously the most, obvious ones would be sight and obviously, touch, smell, all those go into play, but sight is going to be probably the easiest one to tackle.
Right.
Just from, that's the most obvious when you walk up to a landscape.
For sure.
But a lot of times, like I said, people want to incorporate different things to make a sensory garden what it is. And so that's kind of how we approach a sensory garden, but I know there's a lot of different ways to look at it.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think the possibilities are endless, which is what I love about it, is it can be done anywhere. You probably have components of it already in your landscape. Absolutely. If you have small space gardening, you can do it in containers, you can do it in hanging baskets, you can do it in a raised bed, you can do it all across the landscape. So the possibilities are endless, which is kind of the thing about landscape and gardening in general is really you can do so many different things. And this is just one kind of small niche, but you probably already have components of it. So add to it and make yourself a nice big sensory garden throughout your landscape.
Brilliant. And you're dead right. If you start with sight, that invite someone into your garden, and then they stay for the fragrance and the sounds and the smells. But sight, they see something that's attractive and they go right over, and that's the gateway.
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
Get them invited in.
Definitely. So let's start there. Let's start with sight. I think that's a good one. I mean, we're going to try and hit on all five of the senses. So we'll start with sight because that's kind of one that you probably already have in your landscape design to some degree. And it could be a lot of different things. I mean, it could be sight lines. It could be focal points. It could be curves in your design. It could be the color of a Japanese maple when it changes in its fall color. So it could be a ton of different things.
Sure.
It's probably the easiest one. Sure. So we'll kind of dive into this one first.
Absolutely.
Who wants to go?
Yeah, so I love all of those ideas, sight lines, and bringing people in. And then when they become more intimate with the garden, the textures are really fun to contrast.
For sure.
And I also think that everything doesn't have to be flowering all the time, but if you have pockets of flowers
Sure.
that move them along the garden, they want to be outside. I know many times I'm doing the dishes and I can see my garden right out that kitchen window, and I just want to abandon the housework and go outside.
Sure.
Yeah.
But again, I stay for all the other senses that get ignited.
Yeah, I love that. And I always talk about that whenever we talk about landscape design is where do you spend the most time in your house? What are you looking at? Most people are spending it in the kitchen, looking out their kitchen window. And so it's, what are your focal points there? Like, is it a tree? Is it a fountain? Is it, a piece of statuary? What is it that you want to see? and that's where you might tackle it. It's the same as like the front door. Like you're trying to guide the eye to the front door, so you're trying to create curved lines to kind of see that and make it, as you're hosting parties or having guests over, or family, that they come and they can see where the front door and the entrance is, and so that's all sight.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's right.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting part about the sight aspect too, is that it's kind of in the eye of the beholder, right? And so that's what, again, thinking about it, that's how we always approach these when we're trying to start a design process is, what do you find attractive? What is going to grab your sight line? So what is going to grab your eye? And so that can be a lot of different things. That can be, how you layer down a bed, contrasting colors, just with foliage. I mean, that's what, what you mentioned. I love blooms. I love, things that flower. But if you can create kind of that year-round sight with the colors and, contrasting foliage colors, you can really kind of create that all year. You don't have to wait for it. And then you can mix in pockets of color and things like that. So
for sure.
And I think, again, like, you mentioned Japanese maples. I've probably mentioned them ad nauseum now, but I'm a big fan. And so that, to me, like having that focal point, that's how we kind of always start and try to build off of those focal points. And again, that some people are going to love that look, and some people are going to want a perennial garden that blooms, really heavy for a couple months, or native garden. I mean, there's so many different things. And that's where I think it's trying to find what is attractive to you. And because, again, when you're looking out your window, you want to see what you are attracted to. And so that's where, again, too, if it's in the front versus the backyard, is it more curb appeal, people passing by, who sees it the most? And so that's where it kind of gets fun, and you can have, a lot of different ideas and different approaches to the sight aspect of it.
Yeah. So true. And you touched on a really good point is sight is going to change the whole time. So you've got to keep it going through the seasons. Like, what is the winter interest here?
That's a great
Are
point.
These nice garden bones?
Yeah. For sure. Love that comment.
Yeah, it's a big category.
And I love contrast. Y'all both said it, and I wrote it down because I said, contrast is probably the easiest thing, I think, to start with when somebody's getting into gardening. It's very hard to kind of play on the complementary colors. I think it's so much easier to say, hey, I've got a light colored house. Maybe I'm going to do, purple laurel petalum on it, and then play off of that with gold mop cypress. So you've got, that dark burgundy color with the gold color. That's so easy, I think, for people to see and recognize. And so contrast is a great place to start, and it's all about sight.
True. So true.
Cool. All right. We're going to jump right into the next one. We'll go with, what do you say, sound? Let's do sound maybe next.
Oh, sound is a nice one.
Yeah.
So sound's an interesting one, and that's one that I think we have a lot of fun with. A lot of times, again, people don't even know they're necessarily focusing in on a sensory aspect of it, but they do. Then they come in and they say they want to hear, like the sound of water. And so obviously you can try to do sounds with different plant material and things like that, but one of the more popular things we do, introducing it into a garden, is a water element, and that can be, a small fountain. It can be a pond. I mean, it can take on a lot of different features, and we've done river streams and things like that. And a lot of times, those can also be functional as well. They can solve a purpose or solve a problem that you have in your landscape. And that was one we did not too long ago. It was like a 60-foot stream that we built because they had erosion issues and everything else, and all of a sudden, no matter where you're at on their property, you can hear this running water. And
rambling brook.
It's the first thing you get out of your vehicle in their driveway, and you hear it, and it just draws everybody around that side of the house. And so I think that, to us, especially in the landscape world, is one of the more popular ones we do, is introducing that water element and trying to get anything that is going to draw your attention, via hearing it. And so that's kind of how I approach the sound, but I'd love to hear how y'all would do it.
That's a great option.
Yeah. Well, that's a lovely one. Especially bringing in water, because if you're interested in the sounds of nature, it doesn't necessarily have to be an element of the garden, but an element that's attracting natural sounds like frogs, like
Great point.
Yeah, and then if you have trees and shrubs that attract birds, so then you have all song sounds, and so I love the relationship of promoting the sensory garden and then also bringing in biodiversity, because it's natural to hear, birds, and you want to be out in the garden, and water brings birds, for sure.
For sure. And I think those are all really, really great options. I actually wrote down birds because I wanted to talk about that too. I mean, planting shrubs and trees, service berries, to attract birds into your yard, gorgeous little tree or large shrub, small tree, with great fall color and has spring blooms and red berries that attract the birds. I mean, so there you've got sight, sound. I mean, you've even got taste because you can eat them. So, I mean, almost one plant covers all 5 senses. So
Not
that's
the
what's
birds,
so cool.
Not the birds.
Right.
I eat the birds.
No, not the birds, the berries of the service berry.
That's right.
Right. So you can eat the berries, but so do the birds
that's
love
right.
them.
That's great.
And you can do it again in small spaces. You can put, just a bird feeder up in your landscape right outside your kitchen window. And there you're attracting the sound of birds into your landscape. And I think there's also, everybody's got wind. And I think wind is a powerful thing when it comes to the sound in your landscape, whether it's wind chimes, which is a simple one, or grasses. In the fall, in winter, when the grass gets that kind of that russety kind of color and it moves in the wind, you get that great sound. Windmill palms actually create a lot of sound too in the wind.
True.
So I know up north, sorry, you can't do a lot of palms, but down south, the palms actually increase as you go further down south. You can do a lot more different palms and they create a lot of sound. So plants create sound, the wind can create sound. You've got all of these elements, so I think that's great. So great points there. I think to encourage people to look at sound in a different way in the landscape is a great idea. Alex, did you have something for us?
What are the best low maintenance plants for a sensory garden?
The best low maintenance plants. All right.
So, I mean, I think again, if we start to incorporate some of the thinking about other things, so like herbs and things like that.
Yeah.
And so low maintenance, again, as we talked about, is kind of how you take it on. A lot of the herbs you have to replace each year depending on where you're at and things of that nature. But they're, once you get them started, they're fairly easy to grow and things. And so I think of like a rosemary as far as low maintenance. It's something that, you're going to accomplish a lot of different sensory aspects of it from just that one plant, like you were alluding to with things that berry and things like that. So again, I think herbs are a great low maintenance. You mentioned grasses, again, from a texture standpoint, sound and other aspects of it, and just they're beautiful plants. So, I mean, the sight part of it as well.
For sure.
Grasses are extremely low maintenance and can be very low maintenance in the garden. And so you can certainly still find different plants that can achieve multiple senses at once that are still extremely low maintenance if you don't have, what you consider a green thumb, but you still want to be able to enjoy, the benefits of it. You can just be a little bit more particular about what you might choose, and that's going to go a long way. So, grasses, herbs, some different things like that. You can really, and then like I said, the water features, again, you might have a little bit of maintenance and keeping them clean, but you don't have to take care of them, prune them. You just got to keep an eye on them a little bit. So again, that's another aspect of it that can be a low maintenance approach to things.
It's a great option.
Yeah. So I am not a huge advocate for low or no maintenance. I love when people become gardeners and they have mid-level maintenance, right? They're forced a little bit to go out and touch something or prune something back or stay connected. I mean, the American gardener doesn't have any problem loading up that lawnmower, and that's a lot of maintenance. In some cases, it's 70% of their garden is lawn, and if they can commit to that, then why don't we flip it? Why don't we have 70% plants and 30% lawn?
I like it.
And trade out that work that you've been doing for the lawn and put it into, an aquatic gardener. The water lilies are very low maintenance. They sink to the bottom and that sort of thing. But there is still maintenance involved. But that gives you a chance to interact with the plant material and watch it grow and share it and Facebook it and Instagram it and YouTube it and oh my gosh, is that a dragonfly? That kind of thing keeps them connected. So I love that most customers ask for no or low maintenance, but they want more maintenance than they're letting on, and they'll make time, especially if there's a need. I believe in the new American gardener, and they want to stay connected. So,
I love it.
Yeah.
Great.
And I think to that point too, like you said, just to piggyback off that a little bit, if you can get them excited about the garden, like highlighting these different senses and things like that, then they're going to be more willing to put that time and energy into it. So if you can fill the need, if they do enjoy the texture of a lamb's ear or, the sounds of water or birds, whatever the case, then they're going to be willing to put more effort into it. So I think that comes back to how you pick and choose what plants you highlight is to try to get the gardener excited and willing to do a little bit more work because like you alluded to, there is no such thing as no maintenance. And low maintenance is
but
hard
we don't
to
want that
achieve.
anyway. It's not a static thing,
Sure.
It's kinetic and moving parts and connection. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And how great is it when someone comes back to the garden centers and said, hey, guess what just happened? That lamb's ear that you had me put in as a ground cover, I barely have to weed in that area anymore because it's just so full, and it's a great, low matrix level plant material.
Absolutely.
And it has texture, and it's, it smells good. My dogs love it. They make a bed out of it. So, everybody's involved in gardening at my house, but it's so rewarding to put the right plant in the right place and people fall in love with it. And it's not that much work.
No, and I think we'll kind of take care of two here. I mean, we've talked a lot about touch, and so that's what y'all were kind of going into. That would be my low maintenance plant. Would be succulents. I think succulents are so fun to kind of hens and chicks and succulents, and like my favorite one is like that lemon ball, or can't remember the exact name. But there's so many fun succulents that you can use as ground covers. You can use them as containers, and I think kids, getting kids involved in gardening is great. And so I think that's why they love the lamb's ear. They love that fuzzy kind of dog ear feel. Yeah. Artemisia silver mound, I think is such a cool a touch plant, and a lot of them are low maintenance. You're right. So succulents would be mine, and I'll even flip it a little bit and throw in a bit of a curveball for touch, which is cactus and yuccas. Those you don't want to touch, but you might have an area that you
It's
don't
surprising
want.
how touchable those are. There's this whole Mangave collection from Proven Winners. It's the Art and Soul, and you think, oh, that's just magnificent. But that looks dangerous. You can pet the thing.
Yep.
It's so surprising when you come up to one of the Mangaves. They're so very cool.
That's a great point. Something that looks scary to touch, but you should touch it. You
should
give it a try.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
So you got any touch plants, any field plants that you like that we haven't mentioned?
Yeah, one I think that we've mentioned lamb's ear, like you with the dog. I mean, that's one that we get a lot of requests of, and normally it's because they're so soft and fuzzy. I mean, that's again, that's another where they're not necessarily saying they want a sensory garden, but at the same time they're explaining right on cue, a very powerful sense. And so another one, again, grasses to the touch and kind of that texture, that whimsical feel. Yeah. Being able to brush your hand through the grasses, and you can get grasses at so many different sizes. I mean, it fits the bill. I mean, ground covers all the way up through, grasses that get 6-7 feet tall. And then, again, some grasses, pampas grass and things like that, you might not want to get as close to. But again, that all comes back to that touch aspect of it. So those are probably two of the more popular ones we use. And then again, yuccas and stuff like that, one of my favorites we've mentioned, Goshiki osmanthus. It's, false holly.
Have you mentioned that?
Yeah, just a few times. And so again, that one kind of has like those spiny, but they're not so sharp to where you can't touch them. But they do have the benefits. Some of the other side of touch is if you deal with deer and things like that, things that maybe aren't as friendly to the touch in a good way. They're a benefit. They're a benefit to your garden. And so again, all that kind of comes back into play with what senses those affect and things like that.
So many different options. I love it. All right, we're going to jump right into the next one, which I'll go with taste. We'll finish with smell. So we'll go with taste. How would you use taste in your landscape design?
Oh, well, you nailed the rosemary. That's perfect. Yeah. Any of the herbs.
Yeah.
The lavenders are fantastic, and they all have I love lavender coffee. I definitely make lavender shortbread cookies. I mean, as a gardener, I harvest everything I can get my hands on. Right. So if you can taste it, I have. One time I tried to, are you familiar with this Cercidophyllum? It smells like sugar cookies. Mm-hmm. It doesn't taste like sugar cookies. Right. But I tried it. I wanted to know. Yeah. But yeah, most of the herbs, I have eaten water lily, the seed pods. Oh, they're actually delicious.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. There's a lot of tastes in the garden. Some of them they smell like one thing and taste like something else. So that's a good experience. But I think there are just so many options. I mean, and then just right on into vegetables.
Yeah.
Integrating vegetables and ryegrasses.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of taste keeps people in the garden. The kids will harvest,
definitely.
A warm cherry tomato, sun-kissed. What?
You can't
Yeah.
beat it.
That is life changing.
It is. It is.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite designs that we've ever done was a person who really wanted to focus on edible gardening. And so, I mean, it's like right on cue with kind of what you were saying. They had 6 different beds that were built for vegetable and herb gardening. And obviously they had a lot of space, and they were like, they didn't really know what to do with the space. So they said, let's turn it into, this beautiful area for them and the kids. And, again, I give them all the credit in the world. They wanted to be ambitious. And so we planted, fruit trees all along the fence line. They did, persimmon, apple, cherry. I think we did like 10 different types of fruit trees. Some had to have pollinators, and so we mixed in some different ones. They had blueberries and raspberries that were trained on trellises. And then they were leading right into the herb gardens and vegetable gardens, tomatoes and everything else. So, I mean, that to me is what taste is in its most plain definition as well. But it's something that, again, they're going to be willing to put more effort in because they're literally reaping the rewards of their hard work. They get to go out there and harvest it, whether it's, berries, tomatoes, herbs, whatever the case may be. And, they don't have to go to the grocery store as much. And, I think you have a sense of pride when you cook with that kind of stuff that makes you feel like your hard work paid off. And it's going to be easier to take, the time to kind of put in the effort and the maintenance side of things too.
What a lucky family. You changed their life. I mean, there is nothing like how fresh your hand-picked fruits and vegetables
You'll never have
taste.
anything better.
And, I love Vicinium. All the blueberries are just heaven. And I don't even mind fighting the birds. Right? I don't even mind fighting the birds. But there is just something so powerful about growing it and eating it.
Absolutely.
Like, how lucky for that family. Get more of those families.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Yeah.
I've got 2 that I've done in the past that I absolutely love, and I'll start with fig trees. I think figs are, if you're getting into any kind of edible plant and you want something low maintenance but easy and so much fun, I think figs are a great option. I'm not quite sure on the hardiness zones. Maybe I'll have Alex look up figs, but I want to say 7 to probably 9 is probably their range. I know sometimes in colder climates they'll freeze down to the ground and come back from the roots.
Right.
But figs are very easy. They really have hardly any disease or insect issues.
It's true.
They really have hardly any problems. They've been around forever.
Right.
So they obviously have made it through a lot through the history of the earth. And they're just very easy, and you don't need a pollinator.
And
you can
beautiful.
do one, and they're beautiful. And other than I think maybe wasps, I think there's no problems with figs. Sure. So figs are a great one. It can be a large shrub. It can be a small tree. Yeah. So it's versatile. And then the other one is strawberries. Which I love strawberries. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. If you're really growing strawberries for harvesting and yield and all of that, then you'll want to do them probably in rows and really get into it. But I planted them in the landscape just as a ground cover.
Oh, just right in there.
It's a cool ground cover. I mean, it changes colors in the
cool.
winter. It turns kind of a red color. And did I get a ton of them? No. But the patch got bigger, and each year I got a little bit more. I dealt with some slug issues and things like that. But other than that, the strawberries were a lot of fun. And the kids got into it, and it was just a great ground cover. Covered a large portion of my landscape that I didn't really use very much, and so it created a little bit of an edible area that was also visually, I think, very cool.
That is amazing.
That's awesome.
Love that idea.
Cool.
Mike, depending on the variety of the figs there, the best they can grow is in zones 5, 6, or 8.
Oh, that's pretty close.
The brown turkey, I think, is one of the hardiest ones, and it has a nice fruit.
Brown turkey is a great one, yeah.
Yeah,
Strawberry Bear is a very, very good one too. That's my favorite.
Oh, nice.
So
you're in the South.
The founder of McDonald Garden Center, he used to. How many figs does he have in his backyard? Probably like 12 or 15 different varieties. And we used to grow them here at the garden center off of cuttings. So that's when I really got into figs, when we grew them ourselves. But now so many people do them. I think Proven Winners even does some, don't they?
I think we do.
I think like the lower, kind of crawling one. I think so. There's so many different options with them. And so taste is a great one.
They're very artful. I mean, it's the structure of them is beautiful.
The leaf is cool.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, so now we'll finish up with smell. Smell is probably the most sought after, I think.
Absolutely.
Sometimes difficult, but I think smell is a great one. Let's tackle that one. What's y'all's favorite smelly plants?
Oh, wow. That's so hard. Which of my children do I love the most? All the culinary aromatic herbs are right up there.
Yeah.
But there's something pretty special about even the earthy kind of mossy fragrance of the lamb's ear, or The other ground cover that I like is Gaultheria, that winterberry, I think is the common name. And it's like a pepperminty, but it's not menthol. And I forget that I have it in the garden until I step on it and it comes up and I'm like, oh,
love it.
Magic.
Such
Magic.
a cool one.
Yeah,
Very
I like
cool.
the ones you can discover.
Yeah.
They don't have to be cloying and in your face.
It's like anise.
I was.
Oh, yeah,
Can't really smell
nice.
it.
Doors right out.
I'll let
Yeah.
you take it from there then.
Perfect.
That's what I was gonna say. So anise is one. A lot of times people think of those classic hedge plants and privacy plants as viburnums and ligustrum and things of that nature. But one of my favorites is an anise bush. I mean, if you have room for it, it'll get big. You just got to have the room to do it.
Yep.
But if you break that leaf and you really smell that. I mean, it smells just like licorice. I mean,
It's so cool.
it's such a cool one, and it catches you off guard. And I didn't even know what it was until we were pruning it one day. Then all of a sudden, I'm like, "What is that smell? Like, what is this powerful smell?" Because we were cutting leaves and whatever the case may be, and it was awesome. And so I use those when we can. I mean, you mentioned the herbs. I mean, that's like mint and things like that. I mean, they're you can't mistake them. They're another one of my favorites, and then another honeysuckle. That's a cool one too. If you're trying to do a vine, and you have the right space for it, honeysuckle can be another one. But a lot of those vines, those jasmine, they can all be very fragrant. When they're in bloom.
Yeah.
And then obviously roses, you can cut gardens and things like that. But those are more classic ones. But those are some of my favorites. But anise is definitely one of my favorites.
Those are so good. And look at all the pollinators you brought in with your selection. I mean,
for sure.
That's fantastic.
Sure.
Yeah, I had mint on my list for sure. I think it's a great one. A lot of people don't plant it in the landscape because it is aggressive and it's hard to get rid of. But again, small space gardening. If you're in a container environment, if you just want it on your front porch, there's nothing better. Daphne odora is
magnificent.
hard to grow, but the best smell that you'll ever have. I mean, I say grow them in a container because they love perfect drainage. So you make sure you got good drainage in a container, and you can move it around. So when it's fragrant, you can move it up to your front porch. When it's not as fragrant, you can move it out in the yard. But you can plant them. It's easy to do. I mean, you just got to kind of make sure that you work your soil a little bit, make sure you got good drainage.
Yeah.
But Daphne odora is top of my list. I've got some weird ones too. I'm like the weird person today. I'm throwing out weird stuff.
That's great.
But boxwood has a horrible smell. People hate.
Where are we going with this,
smell.
friend?
But to me, it's become a garden smell, and I don't know if it's just me. So that's why I'm throwing it out.
No,
to me, it's a very gardeny smell. It's like mulch. A lot of people hate when they put down fresh mulch. I think it's a very gardeny smell. Sure. So when a new truck of mulch arrives and they dump it all into our bulk bins, I love the smell. I'm working. I mean, I know landscape, installs mulch all the time, and to me, those are gardening smells. So that's why I like it. I mean, I think even like working in the vegetable garden, tomatoes, that smell that you get from a tomato plant. So there's some weird smells out there for sure that I think are kind of interesting.
Signature to gardening, though.
Yeah.
And when I walk by a row of boxwoods, I know it smells like what we all know it smells like. But to me, it smells like a garden.
Like we said, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, Mike. You like what you like.
Apparently, fragrances too.
So, all right. Well, that was great. I think that was a great discussion. Do we have any more? You want to do one more question?
I do have a rapid fire question. Real
Okay,
quick.
rapid fire.
If you had to pick for your sensory garden, what plant would you have? Just one.
Oh,
It's hard.
hands down. Again, another which is your favorite kid question. But I would have to stay in the genera of ornamental grasses. I love the socialization. It's tactile. It's fragrant. That's the ticket for me.
Yeah.
I think I'd probably have to go maybe rosemary. Again, you tackle a lot of those senses outside of water features, of course. But no, from a plant perspective, rosemary, you tackle, texture, smell. It can be beautiful. It blooms. It has you can use it for taste. I think it just tackles a lot of the senses with one plant. You can get through most of them with just one plant.
Yeah. That's a very tough one for me. I can never pick one plant. I think I'll go back to my original serviceberry because it has
boxwood. No.
I was waiting for
so
it.
many. I think it almost covers all of the senses. I mean, it brings in birds for sound. It's got a cool architectural habit in the winter. It's got great fall color, so that's sight. Touch maybe not as much, but you definitely can get in there and prune it and make it into a small tree if you want to. You can eat the berries, not the birds, but the birds will bring in the sound, and then of course doesn't have a great fragrance, but it does capture a lot of the senses, and so serviceberry would be one of my favorites. All right.
Great.
I think that just about does it.
All right. Well, thank you,
Oh,
Heather,
what a
Thank you
so
so
pleasure.
much for coming and joining us on our podcast, The Bros of Gardening. So next week, we're going to be jumping into spring prep. So we're going to be talking about how to get ready for the spring season that is coming very quickly. And so we'll get into that subject. So Daniel and I will dive into that subject next week. And we hope you enjoy this, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.